Hi, and welcome to The Social Angle, a podcast that helps promo pros gain an edge in the social media realm. I'm Vinnie, and on this episode, I am joined by Hollowell to discuss how small businesses with limited time can get started with podcasting. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
All right, before we get into the questions, if you could you please take a minute to introduce yourself, your business, and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my business, I run Angie Studio, which is a creative agency based in Durham, North Carolina, focusing on photography, video production, and some other forms of digital content creation like podcasting for small businesses, nonprofits, and individuals in the area and beyond. I started this company in 2016. And when the pandemic hit last year, so about a year now, seems crazy to say that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just occurred to me like ever since I moved here from Alabama in 2019, that there's just so many business resources here, so much access to networking events, and so much access to individuals that could mentor me and guide me through the business ownership process. And so it felt very natural to me to pass the mic to other business owners and kind of share that expertise so that people living no matter where they live can have access to this kind of knowledge sharing type platform. So that's how Honey and Hustle got started, which is the name of my video podcast. And that's been going strong as well for about a year and some change now. So
Awesome. So you call it a vodcast, which is a video podcast. And the title of it is called Honey and Hustle, and it features conversations relevant to small business entrepreneurs, which our industry is, probably 95%. Can you tell us a little bit about your VOD or your podcast and the inspiration behind it?
yeah, so like I said, it was started mainly in part because I just noticed a disparity between coming from Alabama and coming here to North Carolina. In Alabama, I'll be doing really good to go to 2 to 3 networking events a month. Here, I could go to a networking event, breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day of the week,
Hmm.
right? So that's a huge, huge difference in the sheer amount of people that you can meet and pass through. So just on a numbers game, the likelihood of me meeting someone that can help me in my business, not just be a client, but whether that's an accountant, a lawyer, someone else in the field who's kind of been where I am now, was just, I mean, incredible, amazing. Really enjoyed that community here when I came, and I wanted to give a piece of that back to everybody. So again, I started my business agent studio in Birmingham and other parts of Alabama where I'm from. And so that's a lot of my audience. So I really felt like they, number one, would benefit from that. Birmingham, Atlanta, Nashville was kind of my triangle before moving to this
Sure.
triangle, which is Chapel Hill, Raleigh, Durham now. And so that was kind of the inspiration for it. So I've been doing kind of an interview style podcast, podcast, if you will, just featuring other business owners here in the area that I kind of have learned to reach out to and self-select and just create, relationships with and then have them on the show. So
How do you select the interviewees that you get on your show?
well, at first I was doing it based on people that, I knew and
Hmm.
that were really big inspirations to me and just really helpful and really knowledgeable in their respective industries and fields. As time went on, I was like, okay, I need to be a little more selective because there are certain topics that I like to get into on my show, right? Topics related to diversity, inclusion, sustainability, innovation, things that people who probably haven't been in business that long probably wouldn't be able to touch on as much because they just wouldn't have experience and kind of working through those types of things within not only their internal business structure and business culture, but with the clients that they work with and how they qualify clients, right? So those are kind of how I started to be a little more strategic and specific about the type of both audience, what is that?
Yeah.
Guests and audience that I have
Yeah.
for this.
All right, so your podcast is all about crushing the hustle, and again, my industry, the promotional products industry, small businesses, and our clients are all wearing many hats, and they've got a lot on their plates. A lot of our companies are 1-2 person operations, but they're interested in podcasting. It's like they want to add that to their the repertoire of things that they do. Can you let us know the basics of getting started for anyone with limited time?
Yeah, so I'll start by answering kind of how Crush the Hustle came about and then go into some things that I've learned since I started podcasting. So, one thing I'll say is that Crush the Hustle was kind of a play on the word hustle. Like everybody talks about side hustles, hustle culture, hustling hard. Like that's ridiculous. If you are a one person show, you're going to get burnt out very, very fast if
Yep.
you're about this mentality.
I hear you.
uh, so part of Crush the Hustle was like, yo, you should be able to do this well. You should be able to run your business and still have a life, right?
Hmm.
So part of that, my podcast and podcast, the goal is to be a knowledge-driven platform so that people can find solutions in their business to work more strategically and work more effectively. So that's off top. So when you talk about integrating something like a new form media, which is podcasting, into your business and into your marketing strategy, one thing I would say is recognize that it is a commitment, right? And it's only going to be effective if you stay consistent. If you do 3 episodes of a podcast and say you didn't get any business from it, you miss the entire point of podcasting.
Right.
Like, not a quick overnight marketing solution. It is a commitment to building something within your business, right? And a long form evergreen content solution for your marketing platforms. So that's number one. Understand what podcasting is and the role that it serves. Two, audio equipment. And as crazy as it sounds, I did not do well on the audio front when I first started. I am a photographer first, I'm a videographer first. I'm concerned with how it looks, right? So when it comes to getting an interview, especially since I was shooting in person, it's kind of one-on-one, socially distant at first. I was having issue with like mic placement. So make sure that you really do try to harness in on focusing off top of like audio, because if people can't hear you, it's not going to get you, it's not going to get you so far. The second thing is know who your audience is. Don't just say, I'm going to create a podcast and then hope somebody listens, right? Know who you want to listen to your podcast. I feel like a lot of times people, and this is with marketing anything, they want to hit everybody, but everybody isn't your target audience. It's much
Hmm.
better for you to have a smaller, dedicated, engaged audience than it is to have a bigger audience that sometimes listens, sometimes doesn't really engage, doesn't really care, that sort of thing. So,
Yeah, those are great tips. I mean, I think a lot of people who are in podcasting today, and clearly I'm one of them, uh, don't have a background in this sort of thing. Like I'm a journalist by trade. Like I went to school for journalism. I picked up any of my technical skills, just through college, and even once I got into the internet, I went in online and I started to kind of familiarize myself with some of the technologies. But when podcasting first took off a couple years ago and we started to do podcasting in our studio office, like I didn't know how to do it. I work with any of that equipment. We had soundboards and all this, and I had to kind of figure it out on my own. But now that everybody is remote, I think it's kind of changed the world. And we do all of our podcasting through these third parties like Zoom, through you know uh, Microsoft Teams. I know there's software we use also Be Live for when we do live streams, and we just export the audio from the live streams. So it's certainly created an easier approach to getting our podcasts. But again, like you're right. You touched upon it. You have to make sure that you do tests with your sound. You have to do a lot of quality assurances to make sure that people can hear your podcasts. Now from the video side, if you're going to do a vodcast, what do you generally use when you do video? Are you using a phone? Are you doing Zoom? Like what types of software are you using for video?
so I started off when I was shooting in person, I was using my DSLRs. So I was shooting I eventually got to where I was shooting with the 2 camera setup, editing in Adobe Premiere Pro. This is obviously a little more of an expensive option. So like you said, now that we're remote, the playing field is a lot more even. Zoom is free. And if it's just you and one other guest, then you guys can go in depth. So you don't feel rushed. You can take your time. You can have a little chat before and after. Get really relaxed, record. It's good to go. And then of course Zoom is all in one. So of course audio with you. You can do a separate audio file if you just want to do an audio only podcast. But it's just kind of very convenient. It's free. It's easy. Um, and it's accessible to a lot more people. So right now I'm doing Zoom to comply with social distancing. But as things open up, I'm hoping here in the fall I'll be back to shooting in person. So that'll be really nice.
Yeah, I agree. I think, there's Zoom has opened up, like you said, it's a level playing field. Everyone can do it, but there's something about that in-person connection. You get, you're actually interviewing somebody. We used to do podcasts, in studio. We tried to get guests in, and it kind of lends a little bit more, not credibility, but authenticity to the interview. It's always nice to have an in-person conversation. So let me ask you about, how often you produce. How are you doing podcasts weekly? Are you doing them daily? Like, how much time um, do you, as a small business owner, have to do podcasts?
I do them weekly.
Okay.
I would say if I was when I just started out, that was also my goal, and I feel like that's unrealistic. When I first started out, I probably like if I had to do it over again, probably do like every other week, because it is a lot. It is a steep learning curve. Um, but now weekly for me feels right. So
Yeah, we're also weekly, and it's a challenge sometimes to, like you said, like, podcast isn't all that I do. I wear many hats as well. And getting you got to set up interviews. You've got to, um, you know, get a time that everyone can agree upon, record, post-production, and also, adding the assets to wherever they may live. We've got them all over the place. It's involved, plus, we also write up something for our website each week. So yes, weekly is, to me, I think it's a good spot to have. I would recommend, if people get into podcasting, try to do it weekly, try to be consistent. Like we release on every Tuesday, and we try to push it in social media on every Tuesday. So I think consistency is also key as well. But I do like the whole idea of trying to do this, consistently, and weekly is a good number to me. But also, I think people, really should be mindful about, trying to stick on a schedule. Do you agree with that?
absolutely, absolutely. I think like I'll even be honest. This week I didn't release an episode on Tuesday. I also do weekly on Tuesdays for season two. I went on vacation last week. Didn't happen. You can't beat yourself up every time you don't
Right.
stick to it, but it's the goal. You know what I mean? And as long as you get back on track, I feel like that's what's important. So
Oh, so you have seasons?
yeah,
Oh, wow. So tell me a little bit more about that.
yeah.
It's like a
So
show. It's
yeah,
like a Netflix show, or a, really?
yeah, yeah.
So
So
that's pretty cool. Tell me a little bit more about that. I want to know.
yeah, for sure. So season one had its own feel because I shot all of those in person. I kind of had a look for like a place that people recognize as like my recording space. So I shot at a co-working space here in Research Triangle Park. People recognized it, that aesthetic. Even though I did different setups within that space, people still were like, Venture X, Honey and Hustle, boom. This is what I know to be this podcast, right? So I aim to do 20 episodes that season. I hit that. Took a little break. This season it's been primarily on Zoom. All but two have been on Zoom. And so one thing I didn't do with season one was bonus episodes. So I said my goal will be 25 episodes, so five more than season one. And then whatever I do after that is a bonus episode, and that'll be the culmination of season two. So season three will be back shooting in person. I'm hoping to get a dedicated podcast studio space here in Durham. Super excited about that. Might even have an audio producer with me on set. So a little more of a setup, like
Yeah.
somebody get onto like a show and they, give them a coffee mug. I have branded coffee mugs. Like, hey, do you need coffee? Do you need water? Make it an
Awesome.
experience. I'm excited to be back. So
I love that idea of seasons. And, to me, I never thought about podcasting in a seasonal format. Like when you're a small business, like you said, it's impossible to kind of like get, if you're going to do weekly podcasts, it's impossible. We've missed a few weeks, and look, it just happens. People go on vacation. You're sick. It's just one of those things where small businesses can't expect to kind of reach a weekly goal like that. It's good to have those goals. If you don't reach them, it's okay as well. But the seasons, I like that. You take the summer off, like it's like college. You take the summer off. You start in the fall. Hey, season three. So yeah, I mean, that's a great idea. And having a studio setup, which right before the pandemic, we were working on something. Like I was excited, we were we had the video equipment, we had the software, we were excited. And then now the pandemic has hit and it has completely changed the game. Like, I don't think I'm ever going to go back into a physical office. I've already talked to, people at my company, and I said, look, I am like hitting my stride at home. So that whole idea of having a studio set up may be off the table, but it might not be. We're going to see how things evolve post pandemic, if we ever get to post pandemic, and see if we ever get into a studio. Because I do think, like we talked about earlier, there's something about having people in the studio, having an actual physical space to do podcasts. But anyway, let's move on. So having great content is one thing. And this is one thing that we struggle with. Distribution is a whole different ballgame. What are some of the distribution channels you use for your podcast, and how else should podcasters be promoting their shows?
Oh, I love this question because I feel like this is one of the things that Honey and Hustle has excelled at, even more so than like my original business. Honey and Hustle, first of all, like started it, 2020. So about 4 years into me being a business owner and knowing so much more about branding, messaging, marketing, creating community, all these other things. So I started Honey and Hustle with the Crush the Hustle hashtag and campaign out of the gate. Great tagline for it, and just the messaging was on point. People knew exactly what to expect with the podcast. So when it came to promoting it, I started with Facebook because that's kind of low hanging fruit. Twitter, I was kind of getting more interested in Twitter for like short little bursts of content,
Hmm.
which I feel like podcasts are, or can be because they have links. I tried Instagram for the podcast for a little while, wasn't really feeling it. Um, and then I use LinkedIn because, again, when you're targeting small business owners, creative entrepreneurs, nonprofit founders, that's kind of where they hang out. LinkedIn is one of their
Right.
social platforms. So I started, those are the three that I use now. Sometimes TikTok, when I was doing it in person, I would take like little snippets, put them on TikTok, and they did okay. And I will definitely be returning to that in person. But I would say if you're just starting, three is good. And
Hmm.
Twitter has probably been by far most effective. Facebook is a good consistency one because you can post links. So I usually do the YouTube link on Tuesday when the episode comes out. But then Twitter, world of possibilities, right? I do the YouTube, I do Anchor FM, I do Spotify, Apple, Google Play, which are the big three. And then I also do short videos. I also do audio only type videos. So like it's just like I use a thumbnail that I use for YouTube, create a short video snippet. It's ADA caption, has a little waveform, so it's kind of interactive. So there's a lot of different ways you can repackage and repurpose a video podcast in particular. Audio podcast probably a little bit different, but for
Sure.
video podcast, I have a lot of options, right? Because I have a lot of content just coming out of the gate for that one piece, right? I can repackage that 4 to 5 different ways and people still won't be tired of it. So I would say definitely find a platform that works, have good messaging, focus on building a community. The podcast community is very niche, but they're very active and they're very adamant about their love for podcasts. So Twitter has been very helpful. I would say one weekly post on Facebook and LinkedIn typically does the job. So
Awesome. That's great. And you've seen a good return on investment in terms of listens.
yeah, yeah. So
Awesome.
I would say it grew really fast. Like audio streaming, I'm still kind of figuring out marketing outside of, Twitter for that. But for the most part, video views, I average around 135,
Okay.
135, yeah. So which is pretty good for just being in our second season, I feel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, definitely. It's difficult, and people look at numbers differently. It's all relative in terms of, like, what's good. People ask me, like, what's a good number? I'm like, well, it's relative. Like, like, who's your audience? How many people are following you? What are you looking to achieve? Like, you have to be realistic about numbers. We get 250, 300, 500 sometimes if we're lucky. But that's just, in one platform. Like, you have to really take a look at everywhere you're putting your content and kind of get a better idea of its reach, and that's not always easy because, as you mentioned, you're doing different little snippets of content in different places. You can't just look at your YouTube views and say, this is what I got for this podcast or this vodcast. You have to look at everything that you've done for that piece of content and try to figure out the impact that it's had. And that's not easily done. But I think that if people, are meticulous about, where they're putting it and the way they're tracking it, they can get a realistic number. But it definitely has legs in social media. And, like you said, you mentioned some good places. We put our podcast out in multiple places, and they seem to do well in the ones you mentioned, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. Instagram is tough because you can't really share links. The links, you have to put them at, either in a link tree or, a link at the top of Instagram. It's a little bit different, but you can share video snippets, which we do sometimes. So yeah, I mean, that's great advice. So you mentioned video. You're a big proponent of video. I've seen a bunch of your TikTok videos, and one of them, this is a quote. I love this quote. People love to learn by video. Nobody likes to read instruction manuals anymore. You are the instruction manual. I love this quote because I'm like that. When I get an instruction manual, I'm like, I read 2 lines and I hit a word. I'm like, what does that mean? I'm like, and I throw the manual. I want to see somebody doing something. And that's the beauty of YouTube. Like, I go to YouTube, like, my son gets a toy and it's like, 1,000 pieces. And I'm like, oh my God, I got to put this thing together. How do I put this together? And I go to YouTube first. I don't even read the instruction manual. So do you think video and podcasts are the future of podcasting?
Absolutely, 1,000%, 1,000%. And I mean, I'm gonna be honest and say I don't even watch it, but Joe Rogan, I mean, there's a reason why he got a $1 million deal with Spotify. I mean,
Mhm.
like, it doesn't even have to be like his is not even the best video quality you will ever see in your entire life, but it's the principle. People like to be drawn into that experience. And while there are people who have been dedicated audio only podcast people for a long time, and audio only spaces are becoming more prevalent, I think video is still kind of like holding its true form, because it's like if I can not only hear you but see you and get a sense of who you are and what you look like and relate to you, 1,000%, 1,000% people are going to be drawn into that. So
Yeah, 100% agree. There's this movement in social media to audio, like Clubhouse right now has blown up. It's also, like Twitter and Facebook are working to a similar type of feature that Clubhouse provides. But I think, and I agree with you, I think that people need to be doing a video component to their podcast. We've been doing it since the pandemic. We started off audio. It's funny because you would think that by moving from a studio into like a home office, it would be harder to do. No, it's like these services like Zoom make it a lot easier to do a video component. Um, and I think there's this added element of interest when somebody can watch a podcast that they wouldn't get with an audio. Now, look, there are plenty of people who don't want to watch a podcast. They just put the audio on in the background and they kind of listen to it. And there's always going to be those people for audio podcasts. But if you can do both, I always say do both, because you can now create multiple medias for one piece of content. And I think that's invaluable. So um, I have a quick question before we get to our last fun question. You don't host any of your podcasts on your website, and users are redirected to YouTube. Has that approach worked for you well?
um I would say yes for now. I'm probably going to restructure that in the future. Um, but even still, it won't be like, I know I see a lot of people who do podcasts, they do like dedicated blog posts for everyone for SEO purposes. That's great. I'm probably not going to do that. I'm just going to be honest with you. I'll probably provide specific links to each episode, which I am working on. But for right now, I think the way I have it is it's fine. Yeah.
No, I agree. And we're talking about small businesses here, and I think the important part is getting a system down that works for you. And a lot of people don't have that time to create blog based posts like we do for ASI Central. We write everyone up. It's not extensive, 3 4 paragraphs, but we put all the essentials in there. But yeah, we have the resources to do that. Like a lot of people don't have that. So I would start with, like you said, get your content produced and get them into the YouTube, get them onto, storage, audio storage places like, SoundCloud. Like, to me, I think that that's important. And then you can kind of make your way to your website. Certainly your website should say something about your podcast and do what you do, which is redirect to those podcasts on YouTube. But I think that's a great piece of advice. If you don't have the time, it's really not going to hurt you. It's nice for SEO purposes, like you mentioned, but certainly I think it's okay to kind of work in reverse from there.
Yeah.
So my last question, we always end with a fun question, and I like this question because it's on your website. So if you had to choose just one, which would it be? A fruity craft beer, a margarita, or a mimosa?
Oh man, I want to go ahead and say fruity craft beer just because there's so many options. Mimosa's a mimosa, margarita's a margarita, but fruity craft beer is forever. So that's my final answer.
I'm with you. I'm a beer snob, and everyone at ASI knows that. I'm a huge beer aficionado. And do you have any favorite craft breweries? Look, I've been down to Raleigh a few times, and it's beautiful down there. And every time I go someplace new, I try to find as many craft breweries and check them out. So what are some of your favorites down there?
Oh man, so there's one that's like dangerously close to me, like within a 5-minute drive. And it's called Culture Brewing Company. They have amazing sour beers, and they also do beer slushies.
Ooh,
Love those. And then there's also, I'm a big cider person. There's Bull City Cider Works, incredible cider. They also do some cider beer slushies, super good, perfect for the summer. They have outside seating. Love those two spots. Those are like my go-tos.
oh God, I missed the pre-pandemic going to craft breweries and just hanging outside in the sun. Oh God. Anyway, well, Angela, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really great. So as a final mention, let people know again your business and how they can reach you.
Yeah. So first of all, Angie Studio, you can find me on pretty much any major social media platform. My website is also www.angiestudio, where you can also go and check out the podcast, Honey and Hustle, available on all major streaming platforms as well as YouTube. So definitely be sure to check us out. We'd appreciate it. Hopefully we can help you crush the hustle.
Awesome. Again, that was Ange Hollowell. Thank you so much, Ange.
Thank you. Thank you so much.